Hey, Daily Dose, this is Pastor Larry here, and we've been doing a flyby over the book of Exodus, and today we come to Exodus chapter 14. It's an incredibly famous story called the parting of the Red Sea. Now, a little bit of a background. God had led the children of Israel out of 300 years of slavery in Egypt. Moses had done a ton of plagues. They'd actually, after the Passover, they had turned to the Egyptians and said, hey, give us some jewelry and we'll leave. And thus they had plundered the Egyptians. God had been incredibly with them, and he leads them right into a more or less a box canyon without one side. And so on one side's a mountain, another side's a mountain, and then you've got this body of water in front of them. Suddenly Pharaoh realizes, I just let my workforce go. What in the world was I thinking? He gathers the most powerful army in the world, and they grab their chariots and they begin to head after the Israelites, who suddenly realize on this side's a mountain, this side's a mountain, water we can't get through, and now we've got the most powerful army in the world coming after us. And they begin to cry out to God, and not cry out for help. They began to cry out in their complaints to God, complaints against Moses. Why did you bring us out here to die? They just have totally lost their faith. They've forgotten everything that God has done. And you know what? That's just a lot like you and me. It is so easy to forget all the things we see of God's faithfulness in the rearview mirror as we see the impossible circumstance right out in front of us. And here was their problem. They were dialed in on escaping the problem, not figuring out what God wanted them to do in the problem. It's a natural tendency of all of us as humans. When we find ourselves in a scary, we want to get out of it situation, and it seems absolutely impossible. The first thing we look for is there any way I can get out of this? And when we do that, we turn to compromise, we turn against God. Sometimes we just wave the white flag. And what God wants us to do is to quiet down and to simply figure out, what does he want us to do in this situation? Because there is no trial, there's no temptation, there's no test that we will ever face that isn't common to man. Other people have gone through it. And with every test, he's going to provide a way of escape, and it's called obedience. Now, there have been martyrs whose obedience led them to death, but their way of escape put them in the presence forever in all eternity with Jesus. And there are plenty of times, many of us can look back, where the Red Sea was parted in front of us. But when we face the situation, our first prayer, our first request always has to be, God, what do you want me to do? And then to do the right thing, even if it seems like it's a wrong thing and won't work. Because they had no idea, and it's the way we live. God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts, his ways higher than our ways. They had no idea that this was God's plan to destroy their potential future enemy, Egypt. Moses is told to put his staff over the water. It parts. They walk across in dry land. Well, the Egyptians just keep chasing them, so it doesn't even then, after they've walked on dry land to the other side, seem like they've got a solution. And then God closed the waters. And their biggest potential and future enemy is absolutely destroyed. In impossible circumstances, don't wave the white flag. Don't look for the way out. Never compromise. Start your prayer with, God, what do you want me to do today as a proper response? And he'll part the sea.